Bob Cooney here. As you probably know, I am super excited to spend the next hour or so with Alex Rossol, who's the co-founder of vrCAVE, who is the leading provider of VR escape rooms in the world. One of the things I'm super impressed about is how you've really achieved scale and velocity in this business, which I have said is one of the hardest things to do in the VR business in general. And so we're gonna talk about a whole bunch of stuff. Thanks for joining.
Oh, happy to be here.
Let's just start with kind of like the origin story. What sparked the idea behind vrCAVE? Like, how did it all start?
Like many, it's like, always had the dream of doing a startup. The journey kind of began in 2015. Brother being my co-founder at vrCAVE. We got our hands on the very first VR headsets for us, which is the Oculus Rift DK2, Development Kit 2. I jumped into virtual reality and blown away by the immersion that it offered. And I remember describing it back then, it was like being very much inside the video game. After kind of trying out with a bit of virtual reality, it's one of the things that you shouldn't be doing when starting a business, where you start off with a technology or a product and then you go in search of a market for it. We actually sat down. I remember distinctly sitting in the living room and be like, okay. We certainly felt simulation as where it did well. We figured virtual reality would take quite a bit of while to get deep adoption. So entertainment made sense as a great starting point.
Now, what year was this?
This would have been 2015 going into 2016.
Wow. Yeah, wow, really early.
So yeah, we were like, okay, let's start entertainment, because people will pay for an incomplete product if they're getting the latest and greatest. Very much, we've always been on the bleeding edge here. So our very first minimum viable product, we created a 2-player 10-minute VR haunted house experience called Hospital of Horror. That one ran in the Halloween season of 2016. And I remember we got the very first production. We had 2 VR backpacks, the very first production run of VR backpacks that were available, which is kind of like a modified laptop, gaming laptop that goes on your back. Those were XMG walkers way back when. So we started off with a 2-player system, ran it for the month of October, did tremendously well. And we actually were using the HTC Vive back then, and very successful kind of first foray into virtual reality. And then as soon as November hit, zero interest, and specifically zero interest for horror. So we went from there. We're like, okay, we have something. We have, we able to get sales and stuff, and sales is amongst the toughest stuff to kind of start with. So we're like, okay, where can we pivot this platform so that we're not so seasonal? And we had a bit of a choice to go like, we could go like a Christmas season one, St. Patrick's Day, Easter one, or we could do something that's kind of year round. And
nothing for Bob's birthday? You weren't thinking about the Bob Cooney birthday celebration?
No.
Come on, man.
So we figured escape rooms were a good way of going. Went from 2-player to a 4-player system, and launched our first escape room July 4th, 2017, and then been releasing a new escape room every year since then.
Yeah, wow. Now, I saw you guys for the first time at IAAPA in Orlando, and I want to say it was 2017. What was the first year you showed this at a show?
I want to say it was 2018 probably, yeah.
Might have been. Okay. Yeah, and you had backpacks, you had a 4-player, you had the Siberian space station experience, which I thought was amazing. And I was really impressed back then, and everybody knows I can be hard to impress. But what I loved about what you did there was, playing with physics of, like, you had to throw tools to each other in zero gravity, and one person was kind of blocking these meteorites coming in, and somebody else was trying to fix these things. And so it was the first VR game that I'd experienced that really emphasized teamwork and put us in an environment that was very different. You couldn't possibly do that in a real physical escape room. And so when you built your first experience, what was it about that made you decide, or maybe it was when you started selling it or whatever, that you were going to, stay with escape rooms versus, oh yeah, we did an escape game, now let's do a zombie shooter, or now let's do a PvP game, which is what a lot of the other platforms are doing?
Kind of in starting with Escape from Space Station Tiberia being our first one, being outer space on a space station, of course. And we started with that concept. And as we kind of approached the escape room kind of genre, we wanted to ensure that we did stuff that would be tough to do on Earth, or I guess in a real life escape room. So space was like a natural fit for that. Zero gravity. That's why that was the first one. And then Depths of Osiris, you're underwater, there's sharks. That's tough to do elsewise. And then
Thank God.
Even the third one, Dragon Tower, where it's like, okay, adding dragons in there and stuff and mixing potions and getting cool kind of effects. And it's like, okay. And then with IAPA 2018, I remember we just launched LaserBots, which is our first and probably only so far non-escape room game. Once we released that one, because customers were asking for something for younger, something for replayable, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, this is all right. When's your next escape room coming out? It's like, okay, so you've asked for these things, but you're really looking for us to fill that escape room niche. So it's like, okay, let's focus on the escape rooms.
So I want to dive into that, because you just brought up a really important point that I want to gloss over, because I get it all the time. Customers were asking for something, you gave them the thing they thought they wanted, and it turned out that that's not really what they wanted. Is that a fair characterization of that experience?
I would say so. It's something I've always described as with customers, clients, things like that. They have a vague sense of what they want and a definite sense of what they don't want. And you only are able to kind of find that difference between the two by actually bringing something in front of them.
So what were they asking for specifically that led you to LaserBots? I'm curious.
Some of the constraints of the escape room demographic is that generally the escape room demographic hits 16 or 18 to 35-year-olds, equal male, female. Now, when it comes to like family entertainment centers, birthday parties are big. Having something that could be good for birthday parties for a younger demographic, and also one challenge with escape rooms, which people have tried it in several different ways. We haven't seen a great solution for it yet, is that escape rooms are pretty much a one-shot go. So once you've played an escape room, you're very unlikely to do it again. So getting the replayability, getting a younger demographic in there was trying to get both those achieved within LaserBots.
And so what would your advice be to somebody who's like, in this market, or really in any market with a startup, and they're getting all this feedback from customers, and how do you parse it to understand what do you actually put in your product roadmap, and what do you just kind of smile and nod and say, maybe later?
Lots of things to kind of look at for that. So if I were to give a smattering of some thoughts in that direction, we did early and often play testing, and still do with our games. And I can clarify it here as well, is that this is actually a double-sided market. You have the businesses you sell to, and also you have the player base. So you need something that's fun and something that operators want as well. Now, if you make something that's super fun, players are going to come in, great, I'll get over a chunk of headaches. We get a lot of feedback kind of from operators. It's also important to get the feedback from the players, and getting something in front of them early so that they can have something tangible to test against. Super important for that. There's quite a process to get something full, and I always say when you're 90% of the way there, you're about halfway done. There's so much polish at the end.
So you got this feedback, you're having to balance player or consumer feedback with operator feedback I assume, you've got how many locations now?
We're somewhere between 250 and 260 locations now.
So more than 250 locations. I'm assuming getting operator feedback now is easy. How do you get player feedback? Do you operate your own location, or like what's your method for that?
Yeah, so it's kind of twofold. An amount of player feedback will feedback through the operators. That's their customers, so their pain points. So I get these in, and then we do run our own full testing as well. We do it. We have opted not to run our own location because we very much want to focus on kind of being this software provider and having a split focus between being an operator and dealing, and that's an entirely different business than being a software development studio, making a scalable platform. So we decided to kind of focus on that, and then we have regular testing throughout the year as well to bring players in, get them testing, things like that. I would say a lot of the strong feedback we get is from our partner locations all around the world. I'll give one example of release Space Station Tiberia, did very well, and then we did Depths of Osiris, and one of the feedback we got was like Space Station Tiberia, there's a kind of nice climactic end to it. And Depths of Osiris ended much more in kind of a puzzle and logical one. Hearing that specifically from our partner locations, regularly gaining that super, super valuable.
Yeah, that's something that I've been disappointed with in a lot of games that I've done, where there's just no climax, there's no ending. And it's such an important part, especially for, your experiences run up to an hour, right? You've invested all this time in this thing. You want some release at the end. And talking about length of experience, and I might expand upon this a little bit. Escape rooms generally are an hour. I talk a lot about if you're going to be a destination, the experience has to be about an hour. But with escape rooms and having them be in software, you can scale that, right? You can do 15, 30, 45 hour-long experiences. How do you think about that? How do operators use it as kind of a superpower of doing this in virtual reality?
Depending on the type of operations you're with. Generally speaking, if you're like an escape room business, having hour-long experiences or fitting with all your bookings within the hour is kind of key with that. And ensuring within the gameplay experience, there's enough kind of varied activities and story driving kind of whole bunch of engagement and immersion within the environments. Super, super important. Other ones where it's like, okay, like with arcades, some are looking specifically for an escape room experience. Some are just looking for a taste of kind of puzzles and things like that. So being able to run the games at half an hour or 15, or in certain family entertainment centers or destinations, you're actually looking for high throughput, where you're like 15 minutes in and then 5 minutes out, next group, and away you go. The nice thing with kind of the escape rooms, there's a lot of different kind of experiences kind of packed into our 45, 60-minute experience. So some rooms are easier, some rooms are harder. So there's kind of something for everyone in it. And generally speaking, I'd say we tend towards the 45 to 60-minute mark for it. And lots of players and having a very high comfort experience with it as well. And that's a bit of a challenge with some VR games as well, where it's like, okay, the player comfort isn't put in there.
Talk a little bit about that. When you say player comfort, what do you mean? I think a lot of people could interpret that a lot of ways.
There's a couple of ways of putting it. One is like physically, how are they feeling? Back in the day, there's VR backpacks, heavy and clunky and quite hot on your back and stuff. And then how comfortable is the headset on the players? There's kind of those levels of comfort, and then like actual within the game experience itself, if there's any VR sickness that is happening. VR sickness is going to be something that would have to be kind of contended with. VR sickness is caused by a number of things, but basically it's the symptom is like players get nausea going through a experience while in virtual reality. And it comes when there's a disconnect between what the eye see and the kind of the subconscious experiences, and then what is actually the case. So things that will cause that will be like a roller coaster experience, because the world moves around you, but your inner ear is telling you it's not actually moving around. Another one is on the more technical side, like dropped frames. If the frame rate drops too low, there's nausea coming as well, because there's a delay between you moving your head and what you're actually perceiving and stuff. This has been quite a design thing that we've had to contend with the entire time, and because of our players going in there for 45 minutes, they don't want to be nauseous within the first 5 minutes. So it needs to be a comfortable experience the entire way. And there are ways you can get around it if you have shorter experiences. But if you swap out too short of an experience, then the amount of time overhead you have switching people into VR, out of VR, wiping the things down, resetting the system, next person, paying a lot more in operations time.
Is motion sickness still an issue in some venues for some customers 8, 9, 10 years into the business now, where it feels like we've developed best practices in the industry to avoid it? Is it still a challenge as a developer?
Certainly notice when we bring on new developers. It's like, oh, okay, let's go build out these puzzles. And they're like, oh, can we do this? Like, oh, no, that breaks 3 out of 10 do not go rules for VR stuff. VR, to some degree, I liken it to mobile gaming, where it's like when the first games ended up on smartphones and stuff, it's like, oh, what games make the most sense? And Solitaire were easy ones at the beginning. It's like, oh, okay, that's not all that good. And then Zynga came along with like Clash of Clans and Farmville and all those games. Like, oh, okay, this is how you can actually leverage the platform, and you can't do everything on mobile gaming compared to like PC gaming and stuff or console gaming. Sometimes when I see new entrants into the VR market, they're not always looking at like, oh, okay, well, the frames drop here a chunk, but it shouldn't be that much of an issue. It's like can be quite an issue. So good principles to have, but it's much more well known.
You mentioned new developers coming to the team. Mike has a question about how big the team is at the moment right now.
Yeah, so these days we have 22 full-time staff. So busy. Much of it's on the development team, so that we can continue creating great games and stuff, and getting new ideas in all the time.
Yeah, cool. Now, you mentioned early on you add a game a year. You've been doing that. I think you're at 9 games now, I think, or maybe
9
10
escape
with
room
laser
games,
bots.
and then 11 if you include Hospital of Horror and laser bots.
We've had this conversation maybe a year or two ago about your content library, where most companies, when I talk to them about their library and game popularity within a given library, there are clear winners. There's 1 or 2 games that are, they're 80% of the catalog, and then everything else is almost like niche filler content for the long tail of customers. You're the only company that I'm aware of that has a very different user base around the content, like how it plays out. It's almost level. Talk about that now. Is that still the case, and why you think that is?
I wouldn't say there's any, like, very often in lots of places there's the Pareto distribution, the 80-20. So 80% of the plays come from 20% of the games. That hasn't been the case for us. Like, I'd say our most popular game we've seen is Manner of Escape, which was escape room number 5 for us. Horror and scariness fits quite well. So that has a number of those kind of elements to it. And seeing those numbers and lots of customer feedback again. I think something we've very much focused on is we say we are releasing a new game every year, and it's not coming out every June 1st or every November 1st. If it doesn't grow in terms of capabilities, we don't release it. So we're very focused kind of on quality and innovation.
Have you gotten down a development path with something and just wound up killing it?
Yeah, so anything with kind of content development and stuff, like we get lots of recommendations, and I can kind of say as an aside, we do get a lot of, by being deeply engaged in the creative process, you get a bunch of kind of ideas spawning off on the side, like, oh, this would be a cool idea. Doesn't fit in this game, but let's put it later. I recall with Dragon Tower, we had thought of like having different player classes going into it, and different abilities, and having kind of cool effects, and didn't fit in the game. Showed up 3 games later in Pirate's Plague. And we're careful with a lot of our planning process, but there's always things that end up on the cutting room floor. And whenever you kind of first get the game in front of players for the first time, you hold your breath, like, all right, let's go play it. Let's hope this is fun. Getting that player feedback early helps you from going too far deep down the rabbit hole and being invested in kind of where you've gone. That sunk cost fallacy where you doubling down because you've already spent so much time there.
And we just got a comment from somebody with RV who's basically, and RV is kind of the big room scale VR company that's been around for a long time. And they think you're the best in the standalone free roam space and would love to chat about a possible partnership. Our clients are always asking for great content.
Very cool.
So let's talk a little bit about the industry in general. So operators call me all the time and they're like, "Yo, we really, we want free roam escape rooms." And I'm like, "All right, go to vrCAVE." And they call you up and they're like, "Oh, the territory is not available. Let's start there." Why did you decide, you're one of the only companies, and maybe the only company in the compact free roam space, or what I call the compact free roam space, to offer exclusive territories for operators? Why did you do that, and how's it worked, and what's happening in that, with that business mechanic within your company?
Exclusivity has always kind of been a feature for the vrCAVE from day one, and asked by customers, and understandably so, of course. They're like, okay, if I'm going to invest and buy it into your product, and if I'm going to spend marketing there, I want to make sure that the players come to me, not to the other kind of providers next door and stuff. The first core value we have at vrCAVE is treating customers as partners. If you invest in us, we invest in you, and let's have a win-win and work together on this. And I know that looking kind of at other companies that have some loose amount of exclusivity where they'll get exclusivity in to kind of get the deal done, and it's not written down, there's no real policy, and a misunderstanding of it kind of forms later on. We need to ensure that let's have exclusivity regions, and rather than kind of like get too deep kind of into the paperwork of it, it's like, okay, we're going to go population based, and we have the standard of 300,000 people as kind of the exclusive region stuff. So when you sign on, you can rest assured that you can safely invest in the product, invest in your marketing, invest in this, and you'll be the only one that will be reaping the benefits of those rewards. And I think of kind of holding on to that as a strategy and stuff has been important, because when it comes to kind of strategy and running a business and stuff, looking at the case of Apple famous for having a closed ecosystem. And nowadays it can be seen as an amazing strategy because it's worked out. We've seen great success with it, and we very much kind of hold that kind of core to our strategy and expect kind of like this is a unique thing to kind of differentiate us in the space, because I'd say one challenge in the space is that there can be lots of games. There's always a race to having the most games at your business. And it's not always about having the most games, but having the games that people want to play and people knowing which games they need to be playing at your establishment.
Yeah, that's a truth bomb right there that I've been talking about for a long time, which is, after a while, it's just, it's like Netflix. There's so much to watch. What do you watch, right? And consumers want a little bit of choice, but not too much choice. And there's a lot of research around that. And so how do you think it's affected your growth? What's the impact been on the growth rate?
Good question. I'd say there's ways that it has helped and ways that it has hindered, of course. I'd say on the helping side, people that sign onto vrCAVE can be rest assured. They're like, okay, knowing that exclusivity is there, you guys have my back. That provides a good amount of kind of confidence behind being able to invest deep into the relationship and everything. And then certainly as we've grown larger and larger and expanded out, they hear about our escape room game, and something we've learned is that location-based entertainment providers and entertainment operators, they always check out kind of what everyone else is doing in this space. They'll check out all the businesses. If they're on vacation, they'll check out all the businesses there as well. So by being in so many locations, the word gets out much more there as well. While it does provide some headwinds for having unlimited growth, it does help us providing all the support needed to our partners versus providing it to everyone. There's a phrase and strategy that I like. It's, if everyone's your customer, then no one's your customer.
This is true. You're taking all the stuff that I've said for the years and condensing it into great sound bites. I love it. Let's talk about, now you guys you talked about backpacks and PC, and we didn't talk about what that means, right? For those, most people probably know, but You were in the PC VR realm in the early days. It's obviously cheaper to deploy. They're easier to run and maintain and operate. You're still supporting your PC VR clients. You haven't forced them to convert. In fact, you release PC VR games first before you release them to standalone, which I think is an interesting strategy. What have you found? What insights have you guys gained as a company moving from PC VR to standalone headsets?
As a company, we've always tried to remain on the bleeding edge, and we're hardware agnostic, as we call it. So we very much focus on creating the software, creating the best games, and then whenever a new headset kind of came out, we looked at like, okay, is this a great headset? Are people asking for it? Are the features are there and stuff? And we did get an early version of the Oculus Quest 1, or Oculus Quest when it was back in the day. I remember when we got Space Station Tiberia on, it's like, oh, this looks almost identical. And the graphics were nearly identical in that one. Now, we had to do some downscaling since then, but it was impressive to see you could do that without having a backpack. We saw the kind of the tipping point. We did release the standalone version fall 2019 and didn't get much traction until kind of after kind of 2020, 2021. I'd say like it made a lot of sense for the vrCAVE partners to look at standalone headsets, because if you went with a backpack system, $25,000, $30,000 for all the hardware and equipment, and then you got to pay for software. And then on the standalone system, depending on the type, maybe $5,000, $8,000, you have all the hardware and equipment you need, and then you can pay for software. Players won't pay twice or three times the price for a PC VR streamed experience.
Are you seeing a difference in price point between the PC VR installed base and the standalone at all?
Not too much. We do see some holding on to it where it's like, oh, okay, now it's a kind of premium experience, and they may have other kind of premium experiences, like zero latency would be an example of a premium streamed PC VR experience. It's like, okay, well, that's kind of a stake in the ground for that pricing, and then you can kind of base how the pricing based on it. Sandbox VR has similar thoughts as well. So while I think you could charge maybe a bit more for PC VR, it's almost identical between the two pricing, I would say.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've watched the only other company I know of that switched from PC VR to standalone, but they haven't kept the PC VR, I don't think, was Xcurio with these big, large, free roam Horizon of Khufu things. And they went from backpacks to PC to standalone, and because you can't stream to 100 headsets. I've looked at the Google reviews. The price per game is exactly the same. And when you shifted to standalone, did you see your growth rate increase by dropping the cost of entry?
I mean, we used to kind of have like pricing more similar, like, okay, you go buy a title, unlimited use. So having a software version of a kind of arcade cabinet, like, oh, this is a revenue generator here, and then you go for the subscription. And we've changed the pricing around a bit so that it's like, okay, it's easier to get in, easier to get started, and then price per minute or pay per player has kind of become standard, or most common, I would say, with it. And the interesting thing, shift-wise, technology-wise, is most locations that sign on today, they're looking kind of just on the standalone side. But I can see a case where the PC VR can come back because the streaming technology is coming much, much stronger. HTC Vive's Focus series has really done a lot to kind of get that streaming experience back. So you get the benefits of the PC VR stuff while also getting the lightweight of having the standalone headset. So it's like, oh, okay, there's a case for holding on to the PC and then allowing us to kind of, once again, stay hardware agnostic has allowed us to allow for when technology kind of catches up. It's like, okay, we can go back to PC VR as well.
Yeah. What are you seeing in the headset space now? Because I know you support Quest, which obviously is a price leader, and a lot of operators like the idea of the cheap price point, despite my constant suggesting they don't do that because of calibration issues, which maybe you guys have solved. You've got HTC Focus on the high end. You've got Pico now coming back into the market, and I know you were trying to get that ready for the VR Summit last month. What do you see on the headset landscape? Do you push people towards a certain one, and why is that?
Whenever we kind of decide to support another headset, it's always like, oh, okay, is there customer pulling us there? We're very careful not to be like, okay, let's go do this and then push it out to our customers. And market pull is always kind of a good way of going. So on the PC VR side, one nice thing with it architecture wise is they had open XR and Steam VR and things like that, which allowed for a single platform, and a bunch of headsets are all kind of supported within that platform. So it made development much, much easier. And then the first kind of on the breakaway on the standalone side was the Oculus Quest. So we were able to kind of launch that, and then we had customer pull there. And then after about a year there, it's like, oh, there's Vive Focus 3 that came out, and getting customer pull there. And I'd say out of all the headsets providers from our experience so far, I think HTC's gotten the commercial and enterprise VR space the most correct. Oculus has tried. Pico's looking in that angle as well. And HTC is very much a trusted brand among VR arcades as well. They've made great kind of commercial headsets and wonderful kind of software features for it as well. Quest has its own kind of things with it's easy to get the Meta Quest anywhere. Probably $1 per value. It's probably the best headset. Calibration could be stronger. And then, yeah, we're seeing Pico become more popular, especially in Europe. So there's quite a pull there once again as well.
Have you been able to do anything to get the Quest more reliable from a tracking and calibration standpoint? Because I've talking to companies all the time that are kind of like coming up with their own hacked solutions to make Quest work because of the hand tracking is so good. How have you worked with that?
Yeah, I'd say one challenge with MetaQuest, or a feature with MetaQuest, is that since Facebook kind of owns them, they have a move fast and break things. Certainly been the case.
Which you don't want in location-based entertainment.
No. So like things can be fine for a while, and then I can name some versions, like version 45 is where things change. Version 63 is where things changed.
Is that PTSD?
A little bit. Now we're very careful in terms of like their software, their platform. So you never really want to hack into anything on it as well. It's kind of more like, this is what's being spit out by the system. You kind of need to work with it. We've learned through that as well. It's like a bunch of kind of best practices, like the tracking algorithm and calibration is quite a black box. You pull what you can from academic papers and things like that. And seeing features come out like spatial anchors, which helps with tracking when it works, and being able to also like turn on and turn off that it ends up being very important. Yeah, we've looked at it a whole bunch, and I'd say maybe one headwind that MetaQuest has is that it's trying to do a lot of stuff because so much is being asked of the chip. It's like, oh, okay, we want to do this and that. It's like, oh, okay, less and less is spent towards the tracking algorithm and calibration, because if you're just running single player at home, the calibration doesn't need to be amazing. Whereas like unlocking all the other features, quite valuable.
So HTC, they created the VR arcade industry in 2015, and they've supported it ever since. They recently licensed all of their core tech for VR to Google, and who is integrated into the Android XR platform and operating system. I'm curious your thoughts on that and how you think that might play out for the industry.
Yeah. I think it's a play on or a continuation of the deal made from HTC and Google years back when HTC sold their entire cell phone division to Google. And cell phones, the technology behind the cell phones is really what powers all the standalone headsets. And the Android architecture is what's also running, the Meta and stuff. And there's always an interesting case of like how much of a kind of closed, walled off garden do you want? I'd say Meta follows a good chunk of that, and versus kind of being a lot more open. There's always a lot of innovation that can occur if you kind of open up the platform. Although if you want to kind of keep tight coupling and kind of lots of other reasons kind of going for the other platform. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how it goes. When the headsets first came out, Oculus Rift 1, HTC Vive. They're both good, and we'll see which one will take off. And there's always a slight edge given to the HTC Vive because it was that room scale, and the entire kind of industry, both on the home market and elsewhere, has kind of gone for that much more untethered stuff. And larger space is always valuable in virtual reality. So it was seemingly one feature at the time, and then it ended up being quite the game changer between those two platforms.
Okay, last headset question. Anybody asking for Apple Vision Pro in the market? I think I know the answer to this.
None of our customers. No one even like, oh, I'm thinking about having a premium VR arcade. Can you guys do this? It's like not even that question.
And if you're thinking about it, just don't.
Yeah, I'd say with the Apple Vision Pro, it's interesting. It's a case where it's like bringing virtual reality, mixed reality, XR generally more into the mainstream, which is certainly helpful. Rising tide raises all
Lift all.
boats, so that's helpful there. Now, I'd say with Apple, the question is like, what's the Apple Vision Pro for? What's that killer app? Why the Apple Vision Pro? And I think that question's still to be answered.
So let's look in the future a little bit. You guys are really staying focused on building escape games and building the network. Look into the future. What do you think the future, the next few years holds for vrCAVE?
Certainly, like there's lots more expansion we can be looking at, both kind of in terms of the content, the games, and things like that. There's a bunch of interesting features that we'd love to look at integrating if it makes sense. Admittedly, like a lot of things always come off with the trade-offs. You could add a lot of kind of accessories into it. It's like haptic vests. It does add to the experience. You could have modular play spaces, lots of kind of things. And there's always an amount of trade-off between it. We've always kind of wanted things to be nice and clear for our operators. These experiences can run on their own. I just kind of get players going and then hit spacebar. Games run by themselves, and hints and everything else in the game is fully taken care of by the system. Or you can actually curate the experience. You can have your staff deliver the briefing. You can customize the hints. You can add your own story. There's lots of kind of ways of cutting it. If we were to kind of add new features, we want to make sure that it significantly adds to the experience without causing a hassle. A reason we haven't added full body avatars is a lot of we don't have tracking on the foot or on the hips and things like that. And that adds operational complexity. And if you don't get it well, it just takes you out of the experience because people are always skating around, crouching, things like that. So yeah, we're certainly looking at where the tech continues to go. Streaming looks to be getting stronger. We have some interest around like mixed reality because Meta's pushing hard into it. Apple Vision Pro's pushing into it. And there's kind of other places you can put virtual reality as well. Like hospitality might be an interesting place for a virtual reality where you have like a much more dedicated, exclusive environment. With vrCAVE, it draws in the escape room crowd and draws in the gamer crowd. So it hits the boxes for that. And we're always kind of looking at adjacent markets as well. If you're not developing a brand new market, it's always helpful. So people have done escape rooms. Okay, let's do a virtual escape room version. I think there's lots of places that could be explored elsewhere, like laser tag might make a lot of sense, where it's like, okay, can you bring in enough cool things on the virtual reality side to really make a 10x improvement and really leverage the technology while also building the familiarity from laser tag? And there's a bunch of kind of other entertainment experiences that could be there as well. I'd say amongst all the stuff we're looking at is still very much be in the entertainment space, and that's our bread and butter and where we want to stay.
You just mentioned 10X. There's a guy, Jim Kessler, who runs Lasertron, one of my early laser tag competitors. He's a big 10X guy. Like, how do you improve something 10X? And I think it's clear to me and clear to you how VR elevates the escape business by an order of magnitude. But maybe tick off like just the top 5 things that might be obvious to us, but somebody new watching this might not actually understand.
When we founded vrCAVE, we did a full 30-page business plan and looked at kind of where the value add would be with virtual reality. Going through the exercise of a business plan is always really good. So when we looked at it for escape rooms, it's like, okay, what are the biggest gripes of it? It's like, okay, there's a large kind of upfront fee putting an escape room together. They start at $30,000 up to $50,000. You can either even spend up to $100,000 or $200,000 on an escape room. And that's factoring both in the costs, the build out, the labor, the creative design, all that stuff. So lots of expense kind of goes into the escape room, and you can get started much cheaper with a VR escape room. And then just like maintenance, you have room resets, you have clues that walk out on you. And then if you have like an escape room business, you have 3 rooms, you have awesome kind of customer care, awesome marketing. They come in, they do the 3 rooms, like, okay, do you have anything else? Nope, that's it. Okay, well, let me know when you have a new one. And then that customer is out the door and maybe will never come back. If you get room fatigue, it's like, okay, I got to take this one out, which costs money to take out, costs money to put a new one in, opportunity cost in the meantime, and then will the new one do as well as the previous one? So that's part of the reason why we kind of put in that new escape room every year. So you can look at like a single physical piece of real estate being one kind of arena, and you can have that same customer come back 9 times for 9 different escape room experiences. We're super valuable there and stuff as well.
What's the most rooms anyone runs of vrCAVE in one location?
4 arenas would be the most we've seen, and 3 arenas is a couple, and then 2 arenas actually does surprisingly well. It does more than double of a single room.
Wow.
I think it does closer to like 250, 300% better than a single room. I suspect it's because if you have 2 rooms, you can support larger parties. And it's like, okay, there's 9 of us. You guys are both going into Pirate's Plague. You'll be room A, you'll be room B. See who beats the game first. So you can host those kind of larger groups and stuff. It seems like 2 is the magic number, at least kind of when it comes to our VR escape rooms.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm surprised more people aren't doing more rooms, but the 2 number, that metric is really insightful. Yeah, thanks for that. Okay, biggest lesson as a founder?
Everything takes twice as long and twice as expensive as you expect.
Okay, I'll take that one to heart. And what advice would you give a business founder entering this, particularly the VR business?
I would say half of everything is sales. Having a great product, having great technology, very helpful, but people need to know you exist. You got to get the marketing in there. I got to be able to draw them in, have a good location for that, great customer experience. And then they go into the experience, they play the games, and then they come out. It's like, okay, they're still your customer. Is there a way to capture them again? If you come back to play this other game, get $5 off for your group. Or like, oh, here's a coupon, or here's a stamp card. Lots of kind of things to keep people coming in. And I'd say if you kind of like, even just marketing budget wise, besides having double of what you think, the initial part of kind of the marketing as well, like you got to do things that are unsustainable, but gets the word out, build their reviews, the most important thing out there. So you can do things that are unsustainable at the beginning, and then kind of make it more scalable and process ties it later and systematize it later.
Yeah, that's great advice. Question just came in. Is it better to have unique new content or to have sequel continuing stories and plot, which kind of ties into the whole storytelling thing, which was one of the questions I wanted to get into and we didn't, but so we'll just tackle it now since people seem to be hanging in there. How do you view storytelling as in this, and how do you view potentially serialization of games and stories? Have you ever thought about a chapter 2 of something?
One of the thoughts we have is like, oh, okay, Space Station Tiberia could use a second episode or something, and we were thinking maybe it could have like a prequel to the Space Station experience. Space Station Tiberia being our first one, we've since extended the kind of length of the content, so we actually just added a new escape room back in 2022 for it. One thing we're careful on kind of with serialization stuff, well, it's very cool from a narrative perspective. We're always careful on the player base, where it's like, oh, I can't play Space Station Tiberia 2 because I haven't played number 1 yet. So that second game is locked until they do the first one. Now, if the players feel that they're disconnected enough and they could play either one, then maybe there's a case for it. But there's a case where you can make a bunch of content and players will never kind of get access to it. That's a bit of a kind of cautionary tale of like, choice is good, but only if they feel they have no friction in order to kind of play those games.
And I think, it does tend to drive the development cost up when you're talking about 2 different sides. A lot of people ask me about branch storylines, and I go back to the Bandersnatch episode of Black Mirror, which, was awesome, but cost them 3 times more than what a normal episode would cost. And they're like, yeah, we're never doing that again. So I think just because it's cool doesn't make it a good business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's next? Do you have anything that's imminent? You're getting ready to release Alien Infections for the standalone headsets. Is that out yet?
Yeah, just was released this week.
Okay, awesome.
Alien Infection, our 9th escape room, is now available on all the on standalone headsets, so MetaQuest, Vive Focus, Pico 4 Ultra Enterprise was just added as well. The next game is in development as well. Early planning stages. We'll be going into testing in that kind of over the summer into the fall. That'll be coming to PC VR late this year. Lots of kind of things are kind of available on the horizon. There's no shortage of opportunities. Always a case of kind of paring down the opportunities and stuff. So there's things that we can be looking at, like different kind of gameplay designs. Nice thing kind of with our escape rooms is that we're able to kind of stay within the kind of core escape room gameplay mechanics, but then also explore some adjacent one where it's like, okay, let's have asymmetric gameplay with different playable characters. Runaway Train actually has guns and pistols in it, which looking at kind of options for kind of other things to explore next to it. Yeah, we're looking at options, maybe on the IP side, maybe kind of continue our own stuff. And a thing we kind of ask every time with our con is like, okay, why VR? Why is this experience improved by the technology of virtual reality? And we've seen some games that's like, oh, okay, this is the VR version of X. And it's like, you guys are leaving things on the table where it's like, oh, you could have had a deeper experience if you kind of leveraged both what VR can bring and also this kind of known entity elsewise.
Totally makes sense. Any last words or thoughts you want to close with?
Well, it's been a pleasure to be on the show, and you can always find out more about vrCAVE, vrcave.io. And if you have any questions about the industry or just want to chat or anything we chat about today, always happy to have a conversation.
Yeah, cool. Well, I really appreciate the gold. There's a ton of insights in this, Alex, and congratulations on your success and continued success. I have no doubt you've definitely gotten to the point where you're one of the leaders in the industry and everybody's watching what you're doing, and I just keep doing great work.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, my pleasure. That is it for this version of Being Virtual Deep Dive. Stay tuned. We're going to be doing a lot of operator interviews coming up that we'll be posting on the VR Collective, LinkedIn, YouTube. Just keep an eye out. We're going to go deep, 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 deep this year with people who are actually making money, operating VR successfully around the world with different formats. And there'll be a bunch of vrCAVE operators in there as well. So make sure you're signed up to the VR Collective website at thevrcollective.com to get notifications of all of these live webinars. They come through the Inside VR newsletter. And if you're not getting that, you're crazy. This is Bob Cooney, and I really appreciate you guys showing up, and we'll see you next time.